Grove Bites. I'm Richard Steele. Our guest today is James Lawrence, who is Leadership Principal for the organisation CPAS and author of the Grove book, Leading Well with Others. Grove Bites presenter Alex Guest talked to him about it and how it might help church leaders with all the changes and pressures on them at the moment. Alex has a personal investment too. She's just starting out as the vicar of her own parish. She picked up first on the subtitle, Why Teams Are Not Always the Answer. What, she asked, was the problem with teams?
The subtitle is quite carefully phrased because what it says is why teams aren't always the answer. Because actually, I'm a passionate believer in teams. I think teams are fabulous. And in fact, as you'll know from reading the book, I'm a huge advocate of leading with others and not on our own. But I am suggesting that teams are only one way of leading well with others. And the danger is that they've slightly hijacked the market so that people think that's the only way to lead well with others. And that's why we get into this bizarre situation where, you know, if I said to a member of your congregation, oh, would you like to join a committee? Most of them would probably groan. Would you like to join a team? Most of them would probably, oh yeah, tell me a bit more about it. Because we've got this mindset that teams are somehow better than committees, and they're not better. They're just a different thing, a different entity for achieving a different purpose. So teams are great, but so are a whole variety of other groups.
Great. And the other reason I think it's a really pertinent book is because the Church of England especially are ramping up their efforts to discuss and to approach and to solve problems with mental well-being amongst their clergy and amongst other leaders as well. So do you see good leadership and models of good leadership being a possible key resolution for clergy burnout or leadership burnout?
We do a lot of work on resilience amongst clergy. And one of the things, interestingly, we're recording this during the pandemic. One of the things that even in the pandemic, we already are seeing in the early research amongst clergy is that clergy who lean into leading with others are more likely to be doing well during this pandemic than those who basically operate as solo leaders. And that, you know, what the crisis is exposing in a sense is actually revealing something which was there before the crisis. All the research shows that those who tend to lead on their own are more likely to be those who will struggle with sustainability in ordained ministry. So yeah, I'm a great advocate that actually one of the things, it's only one, but one of the things that can help people in terms of their well-being, their resilience, but actually also their effectiveness, if I can use that word as a leader, is going to be leading with others and not on your own.
And what do you foresee as some of the challenges of leaders to seek out other team members or other colleagues and those who can draw alongside leaders to see growth and the building of the kingdom?
I'm not naive. I do know that there are a large number of Anglican contexts where it isn't simple or easy to find others to share leadership with. We have a little phrase we sometimes use in the work we do in this area. We talk about finding people who are able, available, stable, and persuadable.
That's great.
Yeah, and you might be able to find somebody who's one or two of those, but finding somebody who's all four is not always easy. So I am very aware that it's not simple. However, I think there are a number of things we can do proactively as leaders to draw others into leadership alongside us. And of course, that doesn't have to be paid. It doesn't have to be staff, doesn't have to be colleagues in that sense. It's just as important we're working well with the lay folk within our congregations in that way as well. Now, the lovely Church of England gives us a whole bunch of stuff that is part of our Anglican polity, which is a good place to start. Church wardens would be a great example. And just starting out as an incumbent, you'll discover this. If you have two great church wardens, they can make a huge difference to your life as an incumbent, partly because they are sharing leadership with you, partly because you have some colleagues in that sort of broadest sense of the word to pray with, to talk with, to plan with, to make hard and difficult decisions with, partly because hopefully they will be there in a sense caring somewhat for you and looking out for you and guarding your back. So church wardens are the first level that we might start at. PCC would be the next level that we might look to in terms of sort of Anglican structures. And then there are a whole range of other ways that we might draw others into leadership alongside us. The reality is it initially takes more time, because we all know, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I really appreciated the two scenarios that you write about in your book. One being Sally, who goes kind of head first straight into the challenges of leadership, does really well, but doesn't bring alongside a team. So when Sally eventually has to leave, mostly out of exhaustion, there's no safeguarding of that ministry. And then you also talk about Injit, who really takes his time to see growth, but really invests in the people around him. I thought that was a great parallel.
Thank you. And I hoped by telling those stories, it just gave a bit of a sense of, yeah, okay, the second option, which is Injit, takes more time in the short term, but is more likely to be fruitful in the long term. And I mean that in not just in the sense of the sort of growth and life and health of the church, but also for Injit himself as an individual and his sustainability in his role. So those two stories, we're just trying to pick up that theme as you've identified.
And you also give 10 extremely helpful ideas of how to demonstrate and to get on board with good leadership with others. And I thought one of those being the modeling and making sure that people are participating in that leadership up front was really good. Do you think that that is something that people are inclined to do when they haven't already been identified or authorized as a leader in the church?
Yeah, so I think part of the modeling thing is that if we will have to be proactive in engaging people. I think I mentioned in the book, I was talking with somebody recently from the BAME community, and they were saying that throughout their entire sort of early life in church, they never saw another member of the BAME community leading at the front of the church in any way. And so they basically realized they'd grown up with a sort of an internal message which said, this isn't for you. And it was only when a visiting preacher came who was from the BAME community, and she suddenly saw somebody who looked a bit more like her, and she thought, oh my goodness, maybe this could be for me. And a few years later, she's ordained and leading a church, which is wonderful. So there is something very important about thinking about who are we gathering around us to model leadership. And of course, one of the lovely things about leading with others is it means that even if somebody looks at me and says, well, I'm not really like you, either in terms of gender or in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of personality, there will be others in the team who hopefully they may be like, and they go, well, I'm not like James, but I am like Alex. And therefore, maybe this is for me. So that modeling thing is so important.
Really, really important. And the other thing that you do talk about is collaborative leading. Do you feel as though collaborative leadership is something of a buzzword these days, especially in church circles?
It is a buzzword. And like all buzzwords, I think there's two sides to a buzzword, isn't there? The positive side is that it's trying to engage people with something that's important. So the language of collaborative leadership's been around many decades now, maybe more so in the last 10 years, though, in previous decades. And it has caught something that's really important. I would argue theologically important about the nature of Christian leadership, also pragmatically important because of the things that we've just been talking about. The danger with a buzzword, the flip side, is that because it's a buzzword, people switch off. And we get a bit fed up with it and it becomes a bit hackneyed and we think, oh, for goodness sake, not another person talking about collaborative leadership. And there is a danger of that happening as well. But I think it captures something which actually is deeply rooted in our understanding of the nature of God, the nature of the church, and therefore the nature of the leadership that we ought to exercise as those leading within a church context.
Great. And of course, speaking about the times when it can go badly, again, as a new incumbent, and I wonder if from your own experience, I think I read that you were ordained at the same age as that I was. I just wonder what advice you have for when it will ultimately go wrong, and how leading well with others does create pain for some people, or circumstances that can be painful. How do you get it back on board? What's your advice there?
I think you're very wise to recognize it is going to go wrong. You cannot lead with others without things going wrong on a whole range of different levels. At some point it's going to happen. I wish I had understood that when I was at my vicar factory. I remember being told it, but I didn't really understand it. And I remember that, I could just tell you so many times where things have not gone well, more often than not because of me and the mistakes that I've made. The things that I think help in those situations are humility, a willingness to accept that you are likely to have had a part in the things not going wrong, and you may well be the main contributing factor. So humility, and alongside humility, therefore, there's going to be teachability, a willingness to learn from others, and that's so important. Second thing, the willingness to quickly apologize and say sorry. So in that sense, admit your own mistakes and offer an apology. I don't know why it's so hard to say sorry. I think it's one of the hardest things many of us find to say, but it's so important that we learn to do that and step forward with an apology where appropriate. And then the third thing that I think really helps is having outside counsel. One of the things that regularly happens is that we get quite myopic in our leadership. It all becomes so intense and so focused on what we're trying to do with the people we're trying to do it with, that actually we begin to lose perspective. And what helps bring that outside perspective is having outside counsel. So someone to whom we can go and talk things through. And that might be an informal relationship, friend, family member, somebody we trained with. Or it might be a more formal relationship, a mentor, a coach, a work consultant, and it might be a combination of both. But I generally find that if you've got outside counsel, you're more likely to handle things well when they go a bit pear-shaped, because you've got perspective, you've got somebody else speaking into your life, you've got somebody offering you things that you might not want to hear or might not be able to hear from those who are in the situation, but you can manage to hear them from those outside the situation, and therefore you're likely to handle it better. Humility, a willingness to quickly say sorry, and some outside counsel.
James Lawrence, author of Leading Well with Others. To find out more about his thoughts on how best to do this, then go to Grove Books, where you can order Leading Well with Others as a print copy with free postage or as a PDF. There are many more great Grove books applying the Bible to a wide variety of situations in the world and in the church. They're written by authors who know what they're writing about. Grove Books are bite-sized publications that you can really get your teeth into. Goodbye for now. Hope to see you again soon.